Доброе утро, дорогие друзья.
Good afternoon, dear friends. I'm happy to greet you at our panel Health, Wealth or a Favorite Park, What Makes a Citizen Happy. And it's very nice that this discussion opens today's discussion will be City for All, Health, Sustainability. We have got used that the development of the cities is determined by social and economic parameters and measured by some large figures. In the last years, we've been observing the changes of optical perception of a city, with more attention being paid to people and their requirements and demands. And one of the most important indices is happiness of city citizens. Well, economic parameters, when being calculated, and major cities are leading and small cities are outsiders. And in case of happiness, there are options and opportunities for everyone. And we're going to speak how to make citizens happy, how to measure this happiness, and how specialists in different areas approach the evaluation of happiness and well-being. I greet today's speakers, Larry Beasley, former co-director of Planning City of Vancouver, co-author of Eco-Design for Cities and Suburbs, and the author of Vancouverism, Mikhail Luria, assistant professor, Department of Anthropology, European University of St. Petersburg. We hope Filka Sikulova will join us, senior researcher of Barcelona Institute for Environmental Science and Technology, Marketa Kutte, professor of Land Use Planning, Department of Built Environment, Aalto University, and Alexander Mamayev, executive director of Apex Company. And I would like to start today's conversation about happiness and different approaches of its evaluation and study. I'd like to give the floor to Mikhail Luria, who is going to speak about large study, if I'm not mistaken, planned for 2 years about culture and happiness, how development of culture in Russian cities affects happiness of the citizens. The floor is yours, Michael. Thank you, colleagues. Good afternoon. It's a great honor to speak at Moscow Urban Forum and to share some ideas and thoughts that we already have as a result of our study. But let me start from a bit afar. Since talking about this subject of study as happiness, you should have some reservations of different sort. Therefore, we can't understand what we're talking about. And happiness is a category is quite complicated and difficult to perceive and difficult to be institutionalized by the researchers, and a lot of people write about it who study happiness of different disciplines. There are several reasons for that, several contradictions or dichotomies connected with the happiness category and other side terms and categories. Well, happiness, according to cultural conventions, presupposes different different dimensions, not the state, not social group, on the whole can be happy or unhappy. And we suppose happiness, individual happiness is measured by individual experiences and emotions, although there are social measurements. Happiness is something good, socially shared concept, and the person who has happiness, is happy, has something important. And speaking in that key, we are not talking about internal emotions and feelings, which are difficult to grasp by the experts, but within the frames of different ideologies. And the second dichotomy is between the state and emotion. On the one hand, when we are speaking about a happy man, I used to be a happy man some days ago, today I am happy, and perhaps tomorrow I'm going to be happy. Well, and happiness is something that characteristic of me for a certain period of time and present, and can be measured by different parameters, economic, for family, well-being, and on the other hand, we're talking about happiness as an emotion. I was experiencing happiness within these seconds. Happiness, well, from moment to moment, and difficult to grasp and to study and to evaluate. And you can only discuss about such kind of happiness. And another dichotomy that can be marked, but it's more standard for social studies, economic versus cultural specific. A lot of experts used to say, if we want to study happiness with parameters quite common for European culture, it's quite different for other cultures. And there's a known paradox that according to different measurements, the happiest people could be the poorest, or alcoholics, or people of marginal areas and layers of society. So can we speak about a universal happiness? No. And there are different studies walking different paths using some objective parameters. Those who measure culturally specific happiness should pay more attention to specific cultural context and use internal categories that the study, the culture is using. And speaking about typology of happiness, the researchers and experts have more or less consensus concept that we can talk about two basic, very different and opposite types of happiness. Happiness connected with a Greek concept, otimony, some social, civic value. I'm happy that I'm serving my motherland. I'm happy that I'm a citizen of St. Petersburg. And another happiness, when we mean hedonism, happiness is relish, not connected with body pleasures, maybe spiritual pleasures, but it is another happiness juxtaposed to the first one. And for anthropologists, of all that I have just said, there are several summaries. On the one hand, you should have in mind local scale, local scope. When happiness is culturally local and culturally specific for this or that group. And hence, a study of happiness is connected with ethnographic method. We must understand happiness as the way it is understood by the group we want to understand. And on the other hand, we want to deconstruct happiness category and to look at this category through the eyes of those people who are under study by us, and we want to understand their happiness. So these are the principles for our study that was mentioned by our moderator, the culture of happiness and the role of cultural institutions in well-being of Russian citizens. It's quite a large and long study. We are in the middle of it. It was supported by Potanin Fund. Our idea was to look how in different locations, in different in size and living standard and cultural parameters in different regions of Russia, people tie happiness to consumption of production and consumption of culture. So we limited our focus by intersection of culture and happiness. And we studied different cities from a million citizens city, Perm, quite a well-known city because of different cultural revolutions, and two small provincial towns, Mezень in the north of Arkhangelsk region, with 2,000 people, and these communities are difficult for access in the spring and winter time. As for methodology, we used the whole range of anthropological methods in site interview and other observations. We are trying to be involved and be inclusive in this area, to spend as much time as possible together with citizens and live their lives. And another important point of our methodology, we never ask direct questions about happiness. We want and we are waiting for people to speak about happiness, what they experience, and why they experience pleasure and satisfaction when they attend different cultural institutions. And we are beginning to understand something. Let me share with you our findings. A person can have satisfaction from culture for different reasons. Satisfaction from cultural environment. I mean, architectural, social environment that surrounds this person, or aesthetical environment. Our informers say they enjoy attending theater plays or cinemas, and they would like to live in such cities where the environment makes them happy or at least satisfied. And another pleasure number two, is emotional pleasure, affective pleasure, or because of culture, a widespread concept. You can often hear about culture through the prism of impressions, from light sense up to catharsis of extreme state, using different different metaphorical ways of speech. And culture also gives pleasure and happiness as people understand that they get to know some values. You're happy that you possess some values. You get in touch with them. it is approved and socially prestigious behavior. Besides, culture very often is enjoyable for the sake of communication. A communicative situation is very important when you consume this or that cultural product. And finally, fifth variety of cultural pleasure or satisfaction is from participation and involvement. You can be a manager, director of a library in a provincial town, or you can be a musician, a poet, producing some products. And this pleasure of this type is connected with the concept of creative work and those specific moduses of experiencing creative process. And while you can also say that with these types of pleasure, keeping in mind there is a general concept of culture juxtaposed to mundane, ordinary way of life. Culture is something good and special. Cultural life can be explicitly juxtaposed to ordinary life. They are never equal, even when you don't hear sincere words about it. Culture is apart from ordinary life, like holidays from normal working days. And so connotation of exclusivity and elitarian concept. Disposition of man to culture can be described as a distance and the process, and each act of being close to culture as a transition to certain form which is understood as a norm. And when you cover this distance coming from non-culture to culture, from a mundane life to exceptional life, well, and let me complete by one metaphor for you to judge. Quite a typical metaphor. Culture is a temple of culture. We think it's appropriate, partly, I mean, a picture by Bruegel, speaking about culture as a garden of pleasures, as a garden of cultural pleasures, garden as a site which is always wonderful, nice, and you can recall the name of our panel about different parks. A garden, a place where you don't live, it's a place which you go to have satisfaction and to feel pleasure. You can breathe different aromas. You can grow flowers and plants, plow and enjoy this activity. And those who attend these gardens, they have pity, feel pity for those who do not go. So these are my ideas, well, being in the middle of our study, but frankly speaking, if asked how to use our theoretical constructs and conclusions in your studies, for example, for urban specialists or municipal authorities or people of cultural community, I have no conclusion yet. Somehow or other, we have to wait for some time. We need to finish our process of making conclusions with empirical summaries transformed into practical conclusions. Thank you.
Well, you have 1 year and a half left before you. I hope that you will find those recipes. Thank you very much, Mikhail. I would like just to remind to dear colleagues about our deadlines, because our time is limited, and I kindly ask you not to pass over your time. Is Filka Sekulova with us now? Has Filka Sekulova joined us? Okay, unfortunately, we won't be able to listen to the point of view of economists on happiness. But now, from this topic of gardens of pleasure, we'll go to the topic of urban planning, and I would like to ask Marketa Kuta to tell us about the experience of Alt University in urban planning, which is based taking into account values, demands and habits of city dwellers. Please tell us, how do you research on these habits and how we can create a city environment where people will be happy?
Good morning, everybody. I suppose I was already introduced. I don't speak Russian, so I'm not sure. Let me try to share my screen. Just a moment. I'm disabled to share my screen. Can you let me do that?
Unfortunately not. We don't see your screen.
So
some technical troubles.
I think you have to enable me to share my screen.
Please try again.
Yes, now I can. Yes, thank you. So I suppose...
it's okay. Yes, we see your screen.
Good, very good. Okay, best wishes from Helsinki, where I come from, and where I work as a professor of land use planning in Aalto University. I am originally an environmental psychologist as my background. So surprise, surprise, I have always been interested in this human aspect in planning and design. I have been often told that it is not actually easy or possible even to get knowledge from people from their everyday life. Like this tacit knowledge of everyday life sort of escapes the hand that is trying to reach that kind of knowledge. I refuse to believe that it would not be possible to get usable knowledge from people in planning and development. And my personal answer to this challenge has been a specific place-based methodology or approach that my team has been developed. And here the idea is that if you collect knowledge about human behavior and experiences place-based, then this kind of knowledge comprises a whole new knowledge on top of the GIS-based knowledge about urban structural characteristics. You probably know that there is this huge collection of digital data in geographic information system that then can be complemented with a new layer. I used to call it soft GIS knowledge layer. And why I thought this would be a good idea? Well, from one side, it would allow us to do wonderful new research combining human experiences to the actual physical characteristics of places. And then, on the other hand, produce a new methodology for participatory urban planning. These two sides of the coins are where the possibilities. And actually, we have done research on both sides of the coin with online map-based surveys. This place-based approach has been concretized with these surveys, and nowadays they are called Maptionnaire services. And in fact, we have done research on a number of different themes, including environmental health promotion that I today concentrate on. But we have also, of course, studied participatory planning practices with this approach. And today I will talk more about that side of the coin in the other session, new challenges in urban planning. But let's today concentrate on the research on environmental health promotion and what this place-based approach can bring along to that field. You probably know, many of you may know, that there is a lot of research about the characteristics of environment that promote mental health, and here the answer is dominantly that green spaces promote mental health and environmental stress restoration. But there is another side of the coin here, namely, or another field of research on environmental health promotion. And here we talk more about what kind of environment promotes active lifestyle and in that way promote well-being and health. What is sad is that these two lines of research have stayed quite separate. And in my research, we have tried to do a little bit research on both, but maybe concentrating more on the right side of the story here, mainly the research on active living. So we have developed some kind of context-sensitive research or approach to this health promotion field. We, for example, a PhD student from my team finished her PhD recently about active aging. And what she found was that there was certain kind of environment that promoted active lifestyle of aging people, even if the person wasn't interested at all in their own well-being, or they weren't active, or they weren't especially active individuals. So this means that even potato couches moved more in certain type of environment. And what kind of environment that was? Well, it was an environment with rather high residential density, public transportation, intersection density with lots of sports places. And we have actually done more research with this approach, studying various user groups, also children and young people, and people with different lifestyles. But what is special about our approach is that we are not studying the physical characteristics of environment within static administrative areas. That would not be a very context-sensitive approach. In the first phase, we used buffers around people's homes, and we calculated certain characteristics of environment, like density, within that buffer. But even that wasn't very sensitive approach. Like, people can use their surroundings in a variety of ways. Maybe there are people whose individual activity space is smaller or bigger. So we took that into account. And we even took into account that people can use within their individual activity space certain areas more intensively and actively than other areas. So with this approach, we actually have been able to really study the environmental exposure that each of us gets in our daily life. And if you think about any health research, I would argue that it is super important to understand what is the exposure. How can you otherwise study health in any reliable way? So with these quite sensitive approaches, we have found direct associations between environmental characteristics and health. And this we didn't get when having a little bit less sensitive approach. So we have had lots of different direct associations, and also direct associations with green structure proportion and individual health. This we didn't get before than using the most sensitive way of measuring individual exposure. Now we have still taken one more step in a, let's say, individually sensitive approach, because we have defined individual activity space to various categories or types, because there are individuals who live some kind of monocentric life, like everything they do is surrounded or within around their homes. Maybe they have bicentric lifestyle, that they have two important nodes where their everyday life happens, or maybe they have several nodes. Then we would talk about polycentric activity spaces. And we have found that here we again find interesting health associations, both among older adults and younger adults. We have found that actually monocentric lifestyle predicts good perceived health. This was all I think that I today wanted to share with you. I hope you found our place-based approach interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marketa. Yes, it was extremely interesting and very helpful for all cities all over the world.
I would like to remind you about our deadlines, because we would be glad to have some time for discussion and also to have time for all of the speakers. And now, from the topic of urban planning, we will go to the topic of urban design, and we will continue to talk about city environment and its influence on city dwellers' happiness. And now I would like to ask to talk about his work Larry Beasley, who is the specialist and a theoretic researcher and also a practitioner who was responsible for urban design in Vancouver. And I would like to say that my colleagues, urbanists, use very often examples from Vancouver when we talk about best practices in the sphere of city environment. So I would like to ask Larry to talk about his approach, about his approach and the approach of his colleagues to city environment development. Have you thought about how you can make city dwellers happy, and also how the city design can work for this purpose?
A little bit about your work.
Well, thank you, Mikhail. I'm going to follow on very much from Marketa's themes, because they are very close to what my experience has always been. You know, there's some very fundamental sides to happiness, and I think that's what Mikhail was alluding to in his research. But we also know there's a personal, experiential dimension also to happiness, which is either offered or it's denied by the places that we occupy, where we live and work. I have to say, over the last century or so, this has not really been on the urban agenda, on the design agenda in building cities. Cities have been about efficiency, modernization, the economic engine of the city, and we've been glossing over this emotional side. And the result is that in very modern cities, with all the great wealth and energy and ideas, we still have a lot of unhappy people. So to redress this in our practice, we do something we call experiential urbanism. That is, that we try to design places that not only meet your basic needs, but that also engage and support people. Design places so you factor in day-to-day comfort, convenience, delight, spontaneous pleasure. You, Mikhail, in your notes asked me if I could provide a toolkit for this, 3 ideas that really stand out, and I'm going to do that. These are very simple things. I know them because I've practiced them, and then I've done post-occupancy evaluation to see just how people reacted to them. So I'm talking from very specific experience. Now, unfortunately, I do not have slides right now. But later on in the day, I'm giving a keynote speech, and there'll be about 150 images for you to look at. And also, I would commend to you that my book, Vancouverism, also has hundreds of those experiences. Of the 3, the first I want to emphasize, and it goes very much back to what Maketa was talking about, is the complete neighborhood module. We know that people on a personal basis and a social basis, they enjoy the order and the comfort when the things they need in the city are very close around them, within a few minutes walk in most cases. The mayor of Paris calls this the 15-minute neighborhood. This is where everything is conveniently near, where healthy mobility, the active mobilities happen spontaneously. You don't have to tell people, where people mix up naturally, where you will always see lots of children in the environment. And we know one of the fundamentals of happiness is just seeing children, where there are fun outlets, where there are social things to do to keep people interested. And then when you add job space into that, it gets even better. We know 2 things: proximity, getting things closer together, and diversity, mixing things up, are the 2 magic ingredients of livable cities and therefore happy cities. The second is what I would call the green network, that direct access to nature. Again, Marketa referred to this. Urban life is frantic, and one needs respites from that urban life. One needs intellectual and spiritual reinvigoration. And the best way to do that is to find your way to a green place. Access to nature can never be underestimated when we're designing cities. And by that, I don't just mean a park, one park. I mean a network of greens, green linkages that are all connected. Yes, the grand parks, the large parks, the botanical gardens where you can host sports and exercise, you reinforce health, but also the small places that enhance contemplation and where you can really reconnect with yourself and your friends and your family and those around you. In Vancouver, we go one step further. We actually connect you to the landscape around you, the mountains and the water, because we believe that that green concept is much bigger, that the commonwealth of our experience has to do also with that wonderful natural environment in which we live. And the third is the curation of public space. You know, we experience spaces and places moment to moment, very up close and personal. Are they healthy? Are they safe? Are they social? Is there beauty? Do they touch your heart? Do they touch your soul? Are they really engendering, I would dare even use the word love. Are they engendering love? Have they been designed? Have they been managed? You know, every city is filled with thousands of spaces that are just left over. They're often ugly, they're often forgotten, they're often utilitarian, they're often very brutal. I like a program such as that in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. It's called the City Lounge Program. And what they do is they go actively out, it's like acupuncture, and they find a small space. It's a forgettable space, it's an ugly space, and they just convert it so that it's now a draw for people, individually, families, group interaction and fun. And they bring in lots of landscape, big trees. They add a lot of public art. They manage noise. They include programming in the spaces. And what happens is that people love those spaces. And as they love those spaces, they actually like their whole place. They like their whole experience. They remember it. and it's a factor of their sense of joy and sense of happiness. These are just simple ideas. These are not complex, but when I've done the post-occupancy evaluation after implementing them, I get really high response rates positively about, I want to live here, I want to stay here, I never want to leave here. And that really is the proof of, beyond everything else, that we're on the right track. And I'd like to leave you with a final thought. Because of the complexity of that concept of happiness, it's you can be unhappy in a beautiful city. I will admit that. But I can tell you it is very, very hard to be happy in a city that's banal and brutal and insensitive to your individual needs. So I hope that helps add into our conversation. Thank you, Mikhail.
Yes, thank you, Larry. It was a very inspirational speech. Спасибо огромное, действительно. Мне кажется...
Well, I believe that this approach to development of urban environment is useful to the cities all over the world and in our country. And from urban design, we move to urban architecture, and we're going to speak about Russian cities, and Alexander Mamayev is our speaker. Well, a few days ago in the Russian internet, we saw a scandalous, notorious advertisement about development when a family moves from an old apartment from the old Soviet house, and they are moving to a newly built house, and the main character, one of the main characters, little girl, is looking with disgust at the shabby houses and shows an obscene gesture from the back seat of the car to the old district where she used to live. But here is a question. What are the criteria for good new architecture and new districts? And we often come across a situation when new, bold and bright architecture, well, on the one hand, opposing a standard gray environment, well, it also provokes a different reaction in the society, and there are different opinions of people. And I would ask Alexander Mamayev to speak about the experience of his design bureau Apex, the experience of creating a new environment and that unites people. Mikhail, thank you for introduction. Good morning, everyone. Look here. To begin with, let me give a comment about this provocative advertisement. Well, such advertisement provokes more discussion and pays more attention to our profession of architects and developers, and it well helps to involve more people for discussion and thinking about new environment, and our profession is becoming more popular, and an architect should be a media person, like a rock star or cinema star, for us to be able to initiate a dialogue between us and the citizens. Well, coming back to our conversation, well, Mikhail was right that there is no universal happiness, and for each person happiness is something personal, intimate, without unification. For someone it's a morning jogging, for someone it's a fresh croissant with a coffee in a cafe, other is reuniting with the family, and authors, architecture cannot provide reply to all requirements, individual requirements, but it is to make people think and pay more attention to the space and environment around them. And iconic architecture, it's a thing that is a trigger for development of adjoining areas that are supposed to be developed, having received this impetus. You cannot make a city consisting of the conic architecture. It should be a balance between author's decision and other components. Well, let me also say that we in our bureau support the thesis that happiness cannot be imposed. It's impossible to make a person be happy when you develop certain developing and construction standards in the city. What is important to note? Those scenarios of development that we used to have in Soviet and post-Soviet space in former Soviet republics, they were based on half-totalitarian general plans for urban development that meant that people serve the city, not the city serves the people, and the importance of an individual is not seen there. And the implementation of such projects with broad avenues, centralized places of recreation and places of work was aimed at creation of representative function of a city, but it was not connected with a real-life scenario. Once again, you cannot impose happiness. We believe that the key to success is connected to local places of identity, local points of attraction in every city, in every district, with implementation of landmark architecture and environmental architecture around it, uniting micro communities. A person needs communication, socializing in a recreation park or in some other places, but large parks, they are too much centralized and congested. You sometimes cannot feel your belonging to a certain group or community. Therefore, we are for multi-layer, motley blankets without universal approaches, and the false concept that we know the response to any question of citizen people well, and creation of leisure and transformed environment that would be adaptable for current needs of the population and meet their expectations and wishes. And the realization that within the frames of our architectural project we are able to answer all questions and demands. Well, imagine you are buying a new apartment after refurbishment with furniture and paintings on the walls. But you're not there. It's a scenario that was not written by you, and when we start our projects, we provide for the opportunity of changes and transformation, different scenarios and adaptation in accordance with the needs of a family. Let me finish on it. I have prepared several slides, but I'm not going to share them. Well, thank you, Alexander, very much. Your idea that you cannot make a person be happy, happiness cannot be imposed, and our attempts and approaches to add into our cities more happiness, they are limited, and our opportunities are very important. It's essential to provide more opportunities for people to feel happy, and we have 10 minutes left for discussion. I guess we do not have time to discuss all the points, but let me ask the most important maybe and burning question, well, about the pandemic situation, the problem of the whole world and all the cities. I am convinced that the pandemic is something that makes people in the cities unhappy. So our aim, social space, is development of neighborhood links that was well, broken by the pandemic and social transport that was prioritized by urban experts. Now this transport is being more dangerous from the point of view of epidemiological situation, more dangerous than individual cars. Individual cars that were not welcomed by urban specialists. And here is a question to all participants. What do you think about this crisis situation, a crash test for the planet, for Russian cities? Well, how can we try to make our population a little bit more happy? What are the options in further development of our cities in this situation? Who would like to give comment? Yes, you're welcome. Larry?
You know, it's interesting. Yes, the pandemic has brought terrible pain and suffering to so many people. But what we've discovered in our experience here in Canada is that that neighborhood has actually been a great benefit. People have rediscovered their neighborhood. They're getting out of their cars, they're getting out of transit, they're working at home, and now they need all the services and supports around them. So the neighborhoods, and it goes back to Marketta's point, the neighborhoods that are complete, diverse, supportive are now really, everyone says, thank you so much that we have those. And other areas say, I'm stuck, I'm isolated, I'm away from everything, and it doesn't really work. I must get in my car, which I don't want to do, or I must get on transit, which I think is unsafe. So that neighborhood concept has proven to be very, very effective. And I'll give you a kind of a metaphorical indication of that. I don't know if this happens in your city, but in my city, at 7 o'clock every night in the neighborhood, everyone stands out in their gardens and in their balconies, and we clap and we celebrate our essential service workers. We are very happy. We are very neighborly. We are in the middle of the pandemic, and we've never been closer together emotionally and spiritually. And it really balances that terrible negative unhappiness that the pandemic has brought on.
Thank you very much, Larry. Очень важная тема.
Larry, thank you very much. It's an important topic in the Russian cities. Unfortunately, the neighborhood is less developed than in other world towns and cities. And I believe that these neighborly relations and links have a lot of important things. Colleagues, are there any other points during the pandemic which are important for you now? Yes, you're welcome, Market.
I would also like to comment on this pandemic situation. I live in exactly that kind of situation that Larry described in my own urban village. We have really started using local services more actively, and it has actually meant like a blossoming of this village spirit, I would say. I would like to also tell you that we are having a study ongoing about the actual impact of pandemic to our use of urban spaces. We happen to have a very good baseline study, so we approached same individuals and asked them how they now use urban space, and we already know that for example, their use of close by green areas have increased. But we are not going to stop here. This is a result we expected. We are going to follow up these individuals even after pandemic and see whether any of these new behavioral patterns people have adopted will stay. And that's where the true scientific interest lies, in my view.
Спасибо огромное, Маркета. Thank you very much. Я бы попросил
Thank you very much, Michael. I would like to hear your opinion. Well, your study of happiness in Russian cities, your field work has been going on during the last 6 months. So my question is, how was the field being changed, the field of study, and the respondents, the citizens, how their approach and attitude to happiness and life in the cities changed? During the last 6 months, we have been studying distantly online because of quarantine and certain risks and exposures. When people like us go in from megapolises to small towns. But to summarize, I would protect pandemia. Of course, we would like to have it finished soon and with normal life coming back, but in the situation of some isolation and when you have acute feeling of danger, this changed the approaches in the sphere of consumption of culture and the communication of people with the city. Some practices that used to be habitual, they did not disappear, but we have more acute sense of what we need in life for our basic happiness. And what Larry said about neighborhood districts was confirmed by our studies, including St. Petersburg. At least virtual communities in St. Petersburg are being active when people help each other to get a new job or extra job. And as for culture, the initial panic and hysteria in the cultural community and cultural institutions in the springtime soon changed to productive mode when we saw new forms and modes that, of course, cannot replace live contact of people with cultural institutions, but with more alternative options appearing, but also offering similar effect compared with offline visit to our cultural institutions. Thank you very much. We understood, thanks to this pandemic, that what we have lost. This situation is teaching us how to compensate this loss. Thank you very much. And Alexander, it would be great. We have several minutes left. It would be great if you give your comments and feedback how pandemic and post-pandemic will change architecture. Are we going to see more or less social spaces, or maybe these social spaces on the level of small districts and neighborhoods will be more relevant and important as they used to be? Thank you. In my understanding, pandemic enabled people to critically assess the space around them they live in. We have seen the changes in the perception, a place to sleep in and a place you stay after work. and between work and the country house. Now it's a place where people live. Now I'm seeing it, looking at my staff. Most of our personnel working at home, and people are being more critical in assessing their houses, their districts and environment, and they assess differently the planning of their apartments and houses. As for social spaces, a long-term trend, it's too early to judge about any changes, too early, about the change of social spaces. But the trend that we see when neighborhood relations will be stronger is already predicted and seen. When people know each other more and trust each other more, we already see it, greater consolidation inside small spaces. We see the development of community centers, not even districts, but small quarters, where people can get together and prepare something, watch a movie together, creation of co-working practices inside the small residential precincts. So that's it's within the frames of one community, which can be greeted. And critical analysis, it helps. And there is a demand for change. Thank you very much. The time is over. I think it was a very interesting and multi-aspect conversation about happiness with practical tips and reaction to modern situation. Thanks to all speakers and the audience. And this brings us to the end of our panel, but our conference continues, and I invite you to listen to other panels during this urban forum. Thank you for listening.